Hi, I'm Nawal Motlika and welcome to the first episode of Mamas and Papas. This is a magazine show that will include everything you need to know or don't need to know about being a young, sexy, happy and chic parent. Our show takes you into the world of caring for yourself as a parent as well as caring for your children, answering those questions that you always ask and nobody could answer, and even touch on subjects that up until now have been viewed as taboo in our communities. On this week's episode, we speak to a couple who battle with postnatal depression.
It was only after a couple of weeks with her just not getting any better and things were just getting worse and worse that I realized that something was seriously wrong.
We then look at the modern fatherhood and tackle issues that some dads face. We visit a vet to talk about babies and pets.
I think it's important that every family has a pet, at least one.
Lastly, we talk money. What will you do if you haven't slept at all in 3 weeks since you gave birth? And every time you look at your new baby, you wished it hadn't been born. How would you feel if every time your baby cried, you felt terrified and haunted? This is no longer the world of blues. This is postnatal depression.
It really hit me when I just started crying. I couldn't feel any pain in my body. I really felt like I was trapped. I was in this box that I really wanted to break out of, but yet at the same time, I wanted to be with the baby. So when my gynae came to my house to check me and said, oh my goodness, we have to take it to hospital, my mind tried to process exactly what that meant, leaving my child at home. I just had this baby. It's 4 days. As much as I understood that I haven't been able to sleep for 4 days, at the same time I knew that I needed help, and thoughts started running through my head that what if I go to the hospital and I never come back?
I never saw Eleanor's postnatal depression coming. It was a very good pregnancy and we got on very well and it was a very happy pregnancy. And even after she had the baby, I was told it was just baby blues, and I thought she was just a bit different, and I thought it was the hormones and whatever. She was acting a little bit funny and I didn't think anything was wrong. And it was only after a couple of weeks with her just not getting any better and things were just getting worse and worse that I realized that something was seriously wrong.
I hadn't slept for about 3 weeks and I knew I just couldn't carry on. I was shaking and I was going out of my mind, and I couldn't even look at Leia, my baby, and I couldn't hear her cry, and I had to get out.
My whole world crashed down when Eleanor just couldn't cope. She couldn't do anything. She couldn't make a cup of tea for herself.
I went to go see a psychiatrist, and he recommended I be put to sleep for a week. And I was given the option to have the sleep therapy at home or in hospital. And I knew that if I was at home and I heard Leia cry, it would send me into that anxiety again. I think I would have gone mad. I don't know what I would have done if I would have harmed myself. I was in a mental breakdown. I could have done anything.
In severe postnatal depression, the mother may need to be removed from her baby and hospitalized in order for her to get adequate treatment. Postnatal depression can be that severe that the mother can pose a danger to herself or her children.
I thought that at some point that I might hurt myself, I might hurt the child, because I had read about postnatal depression preparing for my pregnancy. I didn't think that it would happen to me, But at that time, it really hit me that it was happening to me, and it meant that I'm a danger to my child, I'm a danger to myself, so something needs to be done. It was a very scary moment.
Postnatal depression is really caused by a combination of biological, psychological and social factors. There's a very strong genetic component in postnatal depression, and people who are prone to depression or anxiety are very likely to get postnatal depression.
During the first, like when in-law was in hospital and those like opening weeks of when we realized it was postnatal depression, it was a very difficult time, and everyone told me that, you know, it's just a time thing, and after a year everything will be better. But there were times when I thought that things are just never going to get better, and this is the rest of my life is going to be with a wife that is incapable of doing anything, and I'm stuck with this little child, and it was a very scary feeling.
I know what depression feels like from this, and I know what sadness feels like, and there's definitely a big difference between being mentally ill, mentally depressed, and being a little bit down.
It was very difficult for me, and there were times when I felt I just wanted to say to her, just get over it. You know, you've got a healthy child, you've got a husband who loves you. Just get on with it. You know, you're on medication, just sort yourself out. And looking back on it now, it's obviously wrong, but it was how I felt at the time, and it's a very difficult thing, and a year is a long time, and that's basically how long it took for her to make a recovery.
Postnatal depression is a serious emotional and mental illness. It cannot be overcome by pulling yourself together. It has to be treated properly with medication and counselling.
I'm still on medication, and if I need to be on it for the rest of my life, that's okay, because my happiness and my sanity comes first.
I took medication when I was in hospital for those 10 days, and then I was on medication for a while after that, I think a month or so. But I really wanted to get back to breastfeeding, and then which is what my doctor was against. And I really fought to say, I want to breastfeed.
Now that she's almost 2, we are so close, and I love her so much, and she's such a joy in my life. I'm going to be her mother forever, and I'm going to sit with her while she's sick, and I'm going to sit with her when she cries one day over a boy, and I'm going to be there forever.
Thank you so much to our guests for your enlightening stories, answers and contribution. Team Mamas and Papas is thrilled to announce to you that as of this month, our magazine will be available on a monthly basis. Follow the instruction at the bottom of your screen and you could be a winner with Mamas and Papas.
My mom kiss me and then love me and then will be care of me. We kiss somebody and we hug them. My mom met my dad and then they got him laugh. And then they went to get married. And now I am 5.
The home is no longer the women's domain, and the workplace is no longer reserved for men. We engage with South African dads who are involved, committed, and nurturing. Gentlemen, welcome to our show, Mamas and Papas. Great to have you all here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, as we're engaging on, the modern dads, what would you think about, the issue? How much are you involved in terms of, as a modern dad, involved in parenting?
I think it's incumbent upon all parents, first of all, to, if it's possible, to parent their children. So as a father, it's a duty and a responsibility as much as it would be for a mother. Certainly, in the traditional manner, it was the father would go out and bring back the, as so-called, what one would say, the bacon, and the mothers would stay at home. Obviously, the world has changed dramatically, so that parents co-share both the responsibilities, both in the professional sense and the raising of the children. And I think it's a spiritual duty to raise children and to be part of that.
We're becoming much more of, the modern dads. We're no longer like our dads, our dads where we'll just pay, for the bill, pay for school fees. But now we're seeing, that trend of dads wanting to. Do you think, Muzi, our partners or maybe your partner, for example, is giving you that space of you becoming more involved from pregnancy until they give birth?
Well, for me and my partner, it was never a question of space. I was always there. And I read once when I was much younger, and I communicated to my father that whenever they feel that they are getting the incumbent time from their parents, they grow up to be more confident, more sophisticated, as it were, to the outside world. And this is something that I've, from day one, vowed that I was going to do for my children.
When should actually dads start getting involved? Does it actually impact in the children's being, at a later stage that maybe one of their partner or one of the parents was much more not involved?
I think you should be involved right from the pregnancy stage and before birth. Be present at birth, preferably. And it's the most wonderful thing. 25 years ago plus, my first child was born. It was one of the most wonderful experiences in my life. And communicating with a child teaches them language, but it also teaches them give and take and relationships. So, we have responsibilities on both levels.
Then coming to a very sensitive issue, I know, for an example, from different cultural background, from different racial, group, it becomes a bit of a hot, conversation to actually have. The issue of accompanying your partner to the labor ward. What's your take on those, on those issues? Were you there?
When I first saw him, is a feeling that can never be described in words, in my opinion, in any language. And I would say to anybody, it's an experience that you've just got to go through.
Our dads were not actually sort of like in those rooms when we were actually be our mothers giving birth. Do you think that maybe sort of like created a slightly, not too visible, sort of like, distance between, or, that bond between ourselves and our dads? Or when you're there in the room, will that sort of like encourage you to be much more involved as a dad? Or it's sort of like connection, it's a connection that you'll have and that you'll embrace for the rest of your life?
Look, I think that any parent, when there's birth with a child, or any parent, father or mother, there is always a connection. What has changed tremendously, obviously, in our society or the country we live in is that the modernity and the access to a better way of life has allowed parents to go to their hospitals. I think prior to this, fathers did not really go to the hospitals unless there was some sort of medical issue around it. So we're privileged to have that, and as the gentleman, as Muzi describes it, is pure joy when you witness that. But I don't think it removes the connection. In my instance, for example, why I think I should have said this to you earlier, that my participation in my lives of my children is that I had a father. I grew up with a role model. He was always involved in our lives. I saw my father cook for us, dress us, take us out. We were always around him, along with my mom. So that's influenced me to be a participant to my children's lives. So obviously today you have better access to go to the ward and go in and see that your girl or boy being born. And
Wonderful.
That's a tremendous opportunity.
So what actually the last words that you sort of like want to tell the young dads that are out there, what are the activities that they should actually do, just to create that vibe, that excitement, that connection, that forever lasting bond with their girls, with their boys?
Thinking about my own dad and what he taught me, he was a quiet man, my father.
Yeah.
But he taught me that what you do is actually much more important than what you say.
Yeah.
And not that we mustn't talk to our children, we have to.
Yes.
But what we say has to be consistent with what we do over years and years and years and years. It's difficult to do. But it's a wonderful and almost a sacred responsibility.
How important is that? That kind of what you do to your child in terms of the psychological part of it.
Well,
how imperative is that?
They learn language from us. They learn their behaviors from us.
Sure.
If you're shouting, there's a lot of shouting in the house, the children are going to learn to shout. There's violence in the house, the children are going to learn violence. If there's love, understanding, and empathy in the house, that's what they're going to learn.
Wonderful. I wish we can actually continue with this kind of conversations, because I promise you, I know out there's thousands of that who actually wants to know more of trying to find, that kind of comfort zone to say, I want to be involved, but maybe my partner is sort of like pushing me out of the whole, equation, because he feels that I'm not that fit, dad, but I want to be part of it. But all what we actually can say to our listeners, and viewers at home is that please just communicate with us. Just go to our website, www.mamasandpapasmeg.co.za. These three gentlemen, Dr. David, Rishdin, and Muzi, will actually be sort of like part of our forum. For many of us, our pets are significant members of our family. However, when you bring a new baby home, how do you introduce the new bundle of joy to your pet?
Introducing a pet to a child is always a very difficult thing to do, and it should always be done in a very, very controlled environment. I think the thing to remember is it doesn't matter what pet you're dealing with, you can never trust it completely until you've got confidence around your kids. So my best advice would always be to do it with supervision for a very, very extended period of time before you can start trusting that pet around your child unsupervised.
I think normal hygiene needs to be in place when you have an animal in the house. And just like you always should be washing your hands before you eat or before you drink anything or before you touch your face, you should be doing this with your pets as well. So if you've got pets, they shouldn't really harm you in any way. Obviously, the children shouldn't share the food with their animals. Obviously, I've seen kids going down and drinking out of the dog's bowl. The one thing that I must just say is that your dog should be dewormed regularly. So that's an important thing. And yearly, you should be taking your dog to the vet. And as well as that, just look out for things like tinea infections, which is ringworm, which is actually a fungus of the skin. And if the dog's losing hair in any place, let the dog be checked out by the vet.
As a vet, we always get asked what pets are good with kids, and that varies from owner to owner and child to child, depending on what they want. Certainly your smaller dogs and cats, you can't go wrong. Bigger dogs, you've got to be careful, either because of aggression or just because of size. So be careful to choose your breed there. As far as your smaller mammals, you can't go wrong with your rabbits, your guinea pigs, your rats. Hamsters are always a little bit difficult because they are nocturnal, so they are more likely to bite when handled during the daytime with your kids. These days it's become very popular to get the kid a bearded dragon or a snake or tarantulas. Those are very difficult because they can be very finicky and they are likely to strike. They're more instinctive than your normal typical dogs and cats. It's important as a parent to realize the certain emotions that a dog can show. So if a dog ever approaches you front on, ears down, showing its teeth, it's more likely to show tendencies towards aggression, and in instances like that you must be more careful. A dog that is less aggressive and more defensive, more likely to be friendly, would always roll over, show its belly and approach you from the side. When sourcing a dog for your family and your kids, it's not that important where the dog comes from. So it can be from a rescue like the SPCA, it may be from a breeder as such as well. It's important on the type of dog and the age of the dog. So we want to get a dog that will be friendly with kids and raised with kids and less of a tendency for aggression. Dogs that come from the SPCA and that are a lot older, it will be very difficult to judge their temperament around the child without spending a lot of time investing in that behavior of that animal. With regards to pets in the family, I think it's important that every family has a pet, at least one, a dog or a cat, a hamster, a fish. I think it's important for the kids to build up those social bonds, And I think it's important for the parents as well. It gives them some free time with the kid to spend with these animals.
100 rand. 50, 100.
Nothing about becoming a parent is easy or cheap. Children can be a massive financial drain. Between nappies, dummies, and cassettes, one needs to make financial provisions for your new lifestyle.
I think the first planning that we need to consider is around the mum. So if the mum is a working mother, will she get paid maternity benefits, or will the family be able to afford a single income? Then we have to look at what happens once the baby arrives. Will the mother go back to work, or will she be able to afford the cost of a nanny? Or is she going to consider options like working from home?
In South Africa, 4 months maternity leave is specified through legislation. The mother has to take off at least a month before she has her baby, and then, as I say, she can have up to 3 months afterwards. Now, that maternity leave must be given by her employer. It can be unpaid maternity leave. She can then go to the Department of Labour and she can apply for maternity benefits. And those are worked largely on a sliding scale depending on how long she's contributed to the fund.
Maternity leave is compulsory, but what that means is only the leave is compulsory. You are not guaranteed to get any payments. So if a company gives you 3 months maternity leave plus full pay, it's actually a luxury.
You know, there's no fixed amount that one can pin down because it depends on a number of factors. One of the factors is naturally is how much she contributes to the household income. Some women contribute very little, you know, their money is used to spend on themselves largely. In other households, you may find that the income is a critical part of the household. So if she's going to stop working in order to have a child, it's very difficult to say how much should she have set aside. It all depends on those circumstances.
What I would recommend is that you start a budget. So look at your income and your expenses. Make sure that you have enough surplus to go and put away. Because the first thing you need to do is pay off your debt. And the one thing I don't encourage you to do is to go and sacrifice your personal retirement policies for children, because that's not aiding in your long-term planning. So you need to look at your surplus and then start making sacrifices to your income.
Very difficult because you don't actually know that newborn baby. You have no idea how healthy or ill that baby is going to be. In most cases though, if you put that baby onto your medical aid immediately, the child is covered. There's no waiting period. So most medical schemes work like that. The moment the baby's born, you put them on your medical scheme and they are then covered in terms of any kind of expenses that incur afterwards. That's an interesting question, because in South Africa we've always traditionally thought about university education. That has been the big thing to save for, to send my child to university. But what has happened over the last few years is that schooling has become so expensive. And for a lot of people actually need to start saving when their child is born so that they can afford to send them in grade R or grade 1 to a good school, or to a school that is, to say, by no means cheap. So one needs to start saving from day one.
Now, if you look at the cost of education in South Africa, high schools cost as much as 30,000 rand for public schooling. So if you add the cost of inflation, that is going to be very expensive. So it becomes very important that you start saving very early on.
To all you mamas and papas, join me again next week as we discuss post-baby weight loss, autism, and traveling with your family. See you next week.